All right, everyone, welcome. My name is John Callahan from Microsoft. I'm going to be leading this this hour on Microsoft's approach to data analytics and AI. First of all, quick poll. Am I good without a mic or should I be using a mic?
You don't use the mic.
Okay. Is the mic working? Very good. All right. Well, welcome. Welcome to this session. We are going to be talking about Microsoft's approach to data analytics with AI. And so looking forward to kind of walking through with you some of the different capabilities that Microsoft has to offer. But before I get started, I kind of get to know my audience a little bit. If a few of you don't mind just telling me what part of the campus you're coming from. I met a few of you from the booth or you've walked by. But if you don't mind just telling me a little bit about what part of campus, what department you might be from, just to get a bit of a sample. Anybody, please? Teaching and learning tech tools. Thank you. Office of Planning and Budgeting. Thank you. Anybody else? Maybe a couple more, please. Academic advisor in School of Computing and Augmented Intelligence. Thank you. And I saw a couple more hands here. Registrar's office. Very good. All right. Well, glad to have you. Thank you for a little bit of that. It gets me a little bit more familiar with yourselves. And before I get started, I do want to just kind of get a raise of hands. I know ASU has a lot of us vendors on campus in different pockets, different areas. So how many of you use any Microsoft data or analytics tools today? Okay, a few of you. All right. So this is probably the right level of presentation, which is an overview of what Microsoft has to offer in the data analytics space. And so because I do like conversation more than one way, I'm going to probably just keep sampling some questions here and there. But let me ask you this question. When you think about data analytics, what are some of the different areas of data analytics that are needed? So think data prep or how you present that data. What are the different areas of data analytics that, that people might need to do? Okay. Design your schema, designing your layout. All right. So the design aspect. What else? How to, please? Cleaning it up, data quality, very important. Data ingestion, extract, transform, and load. And so these are going to be many of the different tasks that you would have to do in data analytics. Now, a lot of us are only going to do a few of these specialized areas. We just might be specialized in this one area, data ingestion or data prep or the actual transformation. And so when we think about all the different parts of data analytics and what that entire breadth is, that's what Microsoft is solving for, are all the different areas of data analytics. And so I use a very generic set of terms, data analytics, to be the catch-all for all of these things. So as we go left from right, it's about what does that data journey look like? Anywhere from data integration to where we're landing all of that raw data, maybe in a data lake, to how we're actually transforming that data. So that gives me to one of my next questions. I have Spark up there in the third bucket. What are the different languages that you use? Spark, Python, SQL. What are the different languages that you use in your data roles? SQL. SQL. All right, lots of SQL. Any outliers? All right, SQL it is. Okay. So these are the different areas that also Microsoft is solving for, is making sure to cast a wide enough net to make sure to catch all the skill sets that are available, all the way from real-time analytics and to everything that is wrapped around that with data governance. So let's break this down just a little bit more. So if Fabric, that's our product name. Fabric is basically all of these capabilities rolled into one solution in a unified platform. So this is how we segment these out. So all those different individual areas are going to fall into these, what we call experiences. So as a user, if your role is for data integration on the left-hand side and data preparation, that will be the experience that you're going to go through. If you're a data engineer, which kind of starts to bleed over into data science, it's how you're manipulating the data, how you're preparing that for further analysis. all the way down to business intelligence, which is our presentation layer. Now, the most important part about all of this is what data are we working with? So Microsoft, over the last couple of years, has created this platform and also a place to bring all data into one place called OneLake. So if you're used to using OneDrive, we kept kind of that vernacular. So OneLake is a place for all of your data. Sometimes creativity might escape me, but that OneLake is where you can bring whether relational data, flat files, semi-structured data, wherever that kind of data is coming from, you can land that in OneLake. And so everything that you're going to operate is on top of that. One of the other aspects of it is I just mentioned some of those different data types at the very bottom, but also what are the different places that data might be in the cloud. So obviously ASU, big AWS campus. And so there's a lot of AWS data around. And so that would be key to be able to bring that data in. Now I say that, which means you don't actually have to replicate that data. You can virtualize that data. What that simply means is you can point to it. You don't have to like completely copy that data over. And that would be the case for any of those data sources, is kind of cutting that down. Now it's important to also understand in each one of these data areas, who are the types of users who would be using that. So kind of curious, again, I was asking where parts of the campus you come from. Do many of you identify with one of these data roles, whether an engineer or a data scientist, analyst, or do we identify with a lot of those areas? So this is how Fabric, Microsoft Fabric, is allowing the platform to be used by many different data users and experiences. So engineers, scientists, analysts, and citizen. And that's where the different skill sets come into play. I heard a lot of SQL, and maybe we're not going to branch much further out from that. But that being a major skill set, that was something that let's say a data science, or excuse me, data analyst would use. But to be able to branch out into some of the other areas, I said Spark earlier. Quick raise of hands. Has anybody been a Spark developer? All right. Okay, that's all right. Well, if I'm going to bring it up, I might as well mention a little bit why Spark would be important. Spark is a way to deal with in-memory data, which means high performance. Anytime you put data in memory, it's a way to deal with that data very quickly. And so Spark is a language that allows you to deal with that in-memory data and have that flexibility. All right, so there's other aspects that it's important that we're going to dive more into here in just a few minutes, which is the AI assisted. That's kind of why we're here today, was really to talk about, hey, how AI is infused into our data analytics platform. But there are several different layers. I've already talked about OneLake is where all the data is going to go, and it's the kind of the foundation of where without the data, there's nothing more to work with. And then we work up a little bit, OneSecurity. So it's important to be able to segment your data based off of the user rights and privileges of whoever's accessing that. So just like you might do so in a BI tool of saying these user and groups can see these dashboards of visualizations, that's going to be the same kind of security framework for Fabric as well. The thing about it is, though, anytime you're using Fabric is you don't have to worry about, it's a cloud-based tool. And so you can spin up any of those interfaces whenever you want to. And it's about the compute, because really that's the most important part, is to make sure you have enough performance. And that's the beauty of having it in the cloud, is the fact that you can have as much compute as you need for any of the jobs that you're doing. And feel free, if there's any questions or comments or things, please feel free to kind of stop me as we go through them. All right. Now, what I've mentioned so far is basically all these Microsoft ways of approaching things, from Data Factory all the way down to Power BI. But is anybody here, let's say, a Databricks user? No hands for Databricks. All right, well, that would just be another example of, on the far right, partner and other industry workloads. So it doesn't actually always have to be the Microsoft workload, as you can bring other tool sets in. So also where I have leveraged Power BI here on the end, you can use your Tableau on top of that. So Tableau can also access this environment and any other BI tool. And that's the universal nature of it as well, is it's not only the Microsoft platform, but it's also a platform to plug in other partner technologies and tools. But what's starting now, how many of you have heard Microsoft Copilot, the word Copilot? All right, I get some hands on that one. That's awesome. So at Microsoft, we have an army of copilots. And basically that just means how Microsoft is plugging in or infusing AI into any of our tools. And that is no different than our data analytics platform for Fabric, is how are we bringing AI into the day-to-day data analytics? So this is where we bring in Copilot for Microsoft Fabric, and we can also break it down per individual task. We're going to see some examples of this in just a second. I have some pre-recorded videos that we'll walk through and take a look at. But first is Data Factory. Data Factory is that whole process of ingesting your data, starting to create data pipelines, curating that data, the quality of the data. And so how we bring generative AI into the mix is being able to pre-develop or start to, out of the box, create these data pipelines for us. And that's how Copilot will work in that area. Data engineering and data science. Let me kind of talk a little bit more about data science. It's going to apply the same for data engineering, but data science. Anybody a machine learning expert in here? A lot of hands again, but they're very valuable. So what if we could use generative AI to say, hey, I want to be able to create a machine learning algorithm based off of this data to show me the propensity of student retention or whatever the thing, that's always the ubiquitous thing in education. But whatever the thing is that you might be working on is to actually have it generate the code and the logic for us so that we can then curate it as the human. Human should always be the last step in the process, but then curate whatever generative AI is creating for us. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the last one, Power BI. Because BI, I think probably most of us have an idea of BI tools, whether Power BI, Tableau, or the like, is that process of creating. I don't know about you, but I'm not the best designer. How should this layout look? What graph or chart should I use here? That was always something I struggled with whenever I created these kind of output. And so AI is now saying, based off of the data types, based off of the data values that you have, it's going to generate out, using generative AI, it's going to generate those charts and graphs for us as a first pass. So just kind of seeing in another view, these are the different areas where we're applying Copilot to Fabric. So from data warehousing, where we're trying to create our data schema, where we're going to report off of, all the way down to even real-time analytics. So if you have any kind of streaming data, that data can be also brought in using the Copilot. All right, questions or comments so far? Okay, we're going to go through about 4 or 5 different clips of how that Copilot looks. So while today isn't a direct hands-on, this is some pre-recorded demos of what this experience will look like. So first of all, it's just going to be Fabric in general. And let me just make sure everybody can hear this whenever I'm going to start to hit play just to see if we can hear it, pause it, and check in.
Next generation
All good.
AI in Microsoft Fabric empowers you to unlock the full potential of your data. With Copilot integrated into every data experience, Microsoft Fabric lets you use natural language to bring your data to life. From integrating data to writing code to finding insights and creating reports, new transformative AI experiences work alongside you every step of the way, so you can stay focused on getting value from your data. Copilot helps turn your words into data flows and data pipelines, so you can intelligently integrate data from anywhere. When writing code, Copilot automatically suggests code and entire functions in real time. And Copilot can guide you to create machine learning models to unlock insights in your data. Just by chatting with Copilot, you can visually explore your data to create stunning reports, discover insights, and summarize your data into easy-to-understand text narratives for sharing. With Copilot, you can turn insight into action with triggers that monitor your data and notify users. You can even create your own custom natural language experiences that combine Azure OpenAI models and your organization's data, and easily publish your creations as plugins. And with your data in Fabric, Copilot provides insights and answers everywhere work gets done. Most importantly, Microsoft Cloud runs on trust, which means your data always remains your data. Bring your data into the era of AI with Microsoft Fabric.
All right, so that was the opening, kind of the general, a little bit more of the marketing. But is there anything that stood out to you about how, and we're going to dive a little deeper to each one of these areas. Was there anything that stood out to you about how AI was being used in general with the data analytics? Yeah. Yeah. So just being able to write the tape, this is what I need, and have it reflect back what that code is going to be. Whenever I'm a little further away from the keyboard these days. This is why I'm using PowerPoint today. But in my more technical days, I was always a beg, borrower, and stealer, right? That's how I dealt with my code. It was like, okay, who has this? Well, where can I go grab those snippets, and then kind of learn from that and continue to extend that. And so while I'm a little bit further away from the keyboard these days, that would have been so much more helpful, right? Because I sometimes wasn't quite sure what the function is that I needed to use. And I was not an Oracle person, but even before I came to Microsoft, I was always having to use Oracle databases, and their datetime functions always tripped me up. And how was I converting those over to SAS is where I was before I came to Microsoft. How was I converting those over and doing that kind of work? So that would have been certainly a game changer for me. Anything else that might have stood out, please? So that the question is, if somebody has used Copilot to generate maybe a schema or to bring tables together, how do we have that logic? The short answer is not yet, right? So the memory of that training. These are the things that we're still working on as far as making sure they have the full robust of being able to see the logic all the way past the prompt, the interactive prompt, right? So that's a great question. And these are and actually I'm going to take a step back from Fabric for just a moment. Satya Nadella, who's our CEO of Microsoft, one of the things he mentioned about generative AI last year or earlier this year was that if it's a 9-inning baseball game or ball game, using a ball game analogy, we're in inning number 2, right? And so these are the things. We are in exciting times of being able to, what generative AI is doing in that specific aspect of AI. So some of these things are still maturing of what will be built in over time. Thank you for that. All right, let's take a look at the
Next generation.
So for Power BI, this is probably not necessarily Power BI, but BI users, raise of hands. Okay, all right, a few more hands. So BI tools are probably the more commonly used interfaces, whether you're just a user and you're just consuming that output. So that's why I'm going to show this one first, is what Copilot in Power BI will look like or can look like. This is going to be a little bit more instructional than the last one.
Now let's take a look at how we're integrating Copilot into Power BI to help you build reports and discover insights. Let's create a new report on some electric bike rental data from Contoso Outdoors. Now, of course, I could build a report by dragging and dropping fields into the page, but let's see how Copilot can help. I'm going to ask for some suggestions based on my data. And after looking at the data and fields I have in my model, Copilot has given me a few topics I could use to get started. Let's use the trip forecast and optimization prompt so we can see the data we generated from our data science notebook. And just like that, Copilot has picked relevant fields and visualizations from my data to generate a report page for me. We have our forecast for trips broken down by a few interesting fields, and we can slice and dice like any other Power BI report. Best of all, this is a great starting point for editing and refining the report to get just what I want. Let's add the historical trips numbers so we can see them side by side with the forecast. Now let's create another page. I'm going to ask for trip statistics and a summary of station status. And again, Copilot has generated a beautiful report. I can filter and slice and dice to explore the data. And I can see that there's an interesting trend for what hours of the day have the most rentals. There's a spike in the morning, and then in the evening during commute times. I wonder how this compares to the length of trips. Let's drag over the average length of trip and add it to the chart. It turns out there's an interesting outlier here. There's a big spike in trip distance at 2 a.m. I assume it's when the bars let out. And if we filter on just trips at that time, we can see there are a few stations close to college campuses that stand out. But let's ask Copilot to double check. We can ask, which are the stations with the highest percentage of long trips? And this time, instead of creating a new page, Copilot has looked at the data in my report and summarized an answer for me. And we can see it does look like there is an overlap with the universities. Okay, there's one last feature I want to show you. Let's make some space on my report page. And now I'm going to insert a new summary visual where we can ask Copilot to provide a narrative about our data. Let's ask for a few bullet points to summarize station status. Immediately, Copilot looks at our data and is listing insights to help people who read this report see the key facts. All the insights include a citation to show what visual they were drawn from, so you can double-check accuracy. So here we have created a beautiful, insightful report in just a couple of minutes. As you can see, Copilot truly supercharges how you create reports in Power BI.
Okay, so that's Copilot in Power BI. Back in the day when I used to design, the few of you who raised your hand for, hey, you had to deal with BI, oh man, that's hours at best to try to get a few things together, again, because I'm not the best designer. So that was just my deficiency of skill set. But being able to have that augmentation of generative AI behind the scenes, certainly a game changer. Question, was there anything about that particular application of Copilot for Power BI, anything that stood out to you that you would want to comment on? Sure, question. Right. The hallucinations, the question is, how prone is this to hallucinations? And it's a lot less because anytime the Microsoft is developing a Copilot, it is now fit for purpose. When we're using generative AI, generally speaking, then it's more prone to hallucinations. But as Microsoft is developing that, it's making sure that it has the guardrails on. I'm not saying that it doesn't hallucinate, because that's why the human should always be the last step in the process, is to validate or correct any of the things that it found. But because it is fit for purpose, it's a lot more focused on the data itself and the output that it's generating. Thank you for that. All right, so let's take a look at another experience in Fabric and how Copilot integrates in. This is called Data Factory. So think about Data Factory as what Data Factory is again, is the ability to go and grab data, ingest it, and then start to curate or transform that data so that it is going to be ready for the analytics downstream. Let's take a look at this example.
Let's take a look at how we're integrating Copilot into Data Factory to bring the power of generative AI to data preparation. Here I have some data for electric bike rentals from Contoso Outdoors, and I need to transform and enrich for my analysis. Of course, I could do this manually through the Power Query user experience, but let's use Copilot to get my work done even faster. In my bike trips table, I have start and end dates for each trip. Let's begin by asking Copilot to add a new column for trip duration in minutes. And just like that, Copilot has added a step with the appropriate formula, calculating the duration of each trip. If I want, I can rename the column just by asking as well. Now let's have Copilot add another column that groups the trip durations into categories. And this is where we see some of Copilot's real-world intelligence kick in. Copilot knew that a short bike rental is just a couple of minutes and also set up categories for medium and long trips. But Copilot can do even more. We have the temperature when each trip took place, but it's in Fahrenheit. Let's have Copilot convert it to Celsius. And immediately, Copilot added the formula to do the conversion. I can even ask something like, filter out the trips on rainy days. And Copilot is smart enough to know to create a filter to only keep days with 0 precipitation. I'm going to undo that step, and now I want to use Copilot to merge a few queries. Let's switch over to the diagram view so we can see what's going on. Now I'm going to ask Copilot to create a new query that merges the trips table with the table containing our membership data. Copilot figures out that the join can be done on the member ID column. And now I can select the columns I want to include about our members alongside the trip data. And I can rename the table, Trips with Member Info. And finally, for one last step, let's create a new query that gives me statistics for each of the bikes from the trips table. Copilot does a group by for each of the bike IDs and calculates the number of trips, average and total duration of trips, and the number of unique members who rented a bike. Being able to turn natural language to full data preparation and enrichment processes with Copilot is a game changer for data productivity.
All right, so there were like three main things there that I'm going to point out anyway. So in this example, Copilot was one, able to derive a new column with the proper calculation. But as part of that integral step, if you'll remember, it was asking about bike trip, short, medium, long bike trip. It was able, and that's kind of a machine learning algorithm to determine what are the buckets, what should I define as short, medium. Now, all of these things can always be adjusted, but so number one, the intelligence to create and derive new fields with the appropriate category labels. Number two, the ability to also create just any kinds. We saw Fahrenheit to Celsius, I think it went, I don't think it was the other way around, but basically just doing a calculation of that. And then the last one, anyway, that one just slipped off, but seeing these abilities of being able to ask for what we need and have that respond accordingly. Anything else stand out to you about that quick example? How many of you do data preparation today of any? I saw a couple head bobs. All right, similar hands. All right, you guys are tasked with everything. It sounds like everything from data curation to BI. Okay, let's take a look at data science example. I'm going to be curious, before I share this video, how would you define data science? This is always a fun game. Any takers on how you would define data science? That's because it's not a well-defined place. Data science is kind of the catch-all bucket of I can do a little this and I can do a little that. I can do a little machine learning. I can do a little data engineering. So it's kind of a catch-all bucket. So it needs to be very flexible for all the different kinds of tasks that somebody might do. Now, their data scientists are kind of jack of all trades, sometimes master of none, but that is the nature of a data science, is that they can do a lot of different things. So let's take a look at using generative AI or Copilot for data science.
Let's take a look at how we're integrating Copilot for data science. Here I am in a notebook with some electric bike rental data from Contoso Outdoors. I've loaded some data frames, and I could start writing code manually, but let's see how Copilot can help. Let's open up the Copilot task pane. I'm going to collapse this pane so we can see more of the notebook. Let's get started. Right away, I have some suggested prompts to help me understand my data and how to analyze it. Let's ask to see some suggestions of how to visualize things. I get a list of options, and I can ask Copilot to help with any of these. First, I just want to get a basic column chart of trips by station. All I need to do is ask Copilot for help. I can enter my prompt, and Copilot looks at my data and generates the code for me. This lets even someone who's just getting started with Python to get up and running quickly. Now that I have the code, I can insert it into the notebook and run it. Right away, I can see the San Francisco Caltrain station has the most trips starting from it. That's interesting, but now let's ask to get a heat map of trip duration between start and end stations. Again, Copilot is going to take my prompt and generate the code for me. Let's insert it into the notebook and run it. And now I have an interesting heat map of the trips. There are a few outliers, which we can zoom in on. And it looks like San Jose State University has more long trips starting there than compared to the average. And as you can see, Copilot is doing a great job of just letting me ask questions and taking care of providing me the code so I can just play with my data. Now, asking questions from the task pane is okay, but I'd rather just work directly in the notebook. Fortunately, I can use Copilot in a notebook cell just by typing %% code. Let's ask for help creating a forecast for next month using the Profit Forecasting library. Copilot has generated the code. And you can see this takes quite a bit of know-how to be able to use the library. But Copilot is taking care of figuring out how to use it with my data. Now we can run the code. And just like that, we have our forecast. Let's look at the shape of the data by asking Copilot for some visualizations of the output. And now we have a line chart of our new forecast. I could keep iterating and playing, which is really fun using Copilot. But let's finish off by writing the results back to my lakehouse. Copilot is going to truly democratize the ability to work with data in advanced ways. And as you can see, Copilot can give everyone a bit of data science superpowers with Microsoft Fabric.
All right. This, again, I would have never called myself a data scientist, but the opportunity to continue to chat with it and develop large swaths of code out of Python libraries that I would not have known, right? So that is certainly one of the gains there. Anything that stood out to you about that? I didn't see as many hands raised when I was asking about data science, but anything that stood out to you about how data science could be applied here? So what are the themes that you're starting to see with the copilots in Fabric? Any particular themes? Time savings. Yeah. I don't need to ask you to be an expert in area A, B, and C, but you can still be proficient and in areas A, B, and C. So now we get to spend more time on problem solving, on thinking through the problem, and then having AI to help us do that. You know what? One of the things I forgot to do as I kick this off is, I'm sorry, this is right in the middle of where I would normally do at the beginning. But I'm curious, how are y'all using generative AI today? I'm going to kind of stop here for a second. How are y'all using generative AI today? I want to hear what your themes are, and they kind of blend together with some of the things. Please. What kind of code? You use R, a lot of R. Okay. So when did you start using R? I'm going to interview you a little bit here. 5 years ago. When did you start using, probably ChatGPT for, how has that changed? Completely changed. So I'm sure many of you can do that math faster than I can, but 60 minutes to 5, the percentage of gain of that, right? That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. How else are you using generative AI? Oh, please. Yes. Okay. So when you're talking about tutoring, sorry, I'm going to interview anybody who has anything to say. Tutoring, are you talking about within the areas of data analytics specifically, or just kind of anything? Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, I did the same thing. I was working on a car over the summer, and I was trying to troubleshoot it, and I used ChatGPT, not the Azure version of it, but the ChatGPT, and was voice talking to, hey, help me troubleshoot that. So great example. What did you say about the SQL code as well? Sure. Okay. So looking through your code, being kind of a QA on your code, or even explaining it as it will. Any other examples, please?
What job title should a student look at when they have an entry and grade? And it's amazing, it comes up with like 35, 40 titles, description of the job and everything, and I share that with the students. Because often they know what they want to do, but they don't really know what it's called in the real world. So I use that a lot with students, generate options for them to build.
Well, that's really cool. So what she said was taking degree field and then determining what kind of career options might be available in that area. And actually, this is my role at Microsoft is a data and AI specialist. So today I'm focusing on data and analytics, but I also focus on the AI aspect of it. And that's one of the things I work with other universities on is AI academic advisor, or it's kind of advising prep for the most part, is being able to kind of help students navigate to some of those administrative tasks. And so by the time they come to you, it's an opportunity for true mentorship. So taking some of those administrative tasks out. Yes, how are you using? Very good. So using for campaign strategies based off of cohorts that you might identify with your alumni data. Very cool. All right. Any other takers on that? So again, what I'm hearing, the theme is general generative AI themes is condensing, tutoring, generating code, the R code, and explaining those different aspects, but also business application. Thank you for sharing that. I realize I was right in the middle of my different little demos, but I think that's important because the themes are going to be very similar to how we use it personally, and then also how we apply it at Microsoft and our data tools. All right, I'm going to share just one. There's two more. I'm just going to share one more example, and this will be the last one for this part. So this is about data warehousing. If you're not familiar with the data warehouse concept, basically you've taken all these different data sources. So let me kind of use typical campus examples. So you have student information system, you have learning management system. Is it Canvas here? I can't remember. Canvas, okay. All right, Canvas. And so all these different data sources, how do we pull all of this data together to be unified to create one kind of big view of one single domain, which could be students or alumni or whatever the aspect may be. So data warehousing has a lot to do with how that data has been formed, and then how you use, in this case, SQL and other viewpoints to manage that data. All right, one last example.
We're integrating Copilot everywhere in Fabric to help everyone both upskill and become more productive with data. I'm excited to share a few new Copilot experiences in Fabric that are coming to public preview. First, we're adding a Copilot for data warehousing. Here I am in a data warehouse, and I can open up the Copilot task pane right away. I could ask questions here, but we're also integrating Copilot contextually in the experience as well. For example, there are a few shared queries in the database that I didn't create, and I don't really understand what they do. Now I can just ask Copilot to explain the query, and it adds comments letting me know what's going on. In this case, the query is calculating average fare amounts for each day of the week. Copilot can also help me with SQL I'm trying to write. We're integrating Copilot everywhere in Fabric to help everyone both upskill and become more productive with data. I'm excited to share a few new Copilot experiences in Fabric. We're integrating Copilot everywhere in Fabric to help everyone both upskill and become more productive with data. I'm excited to...
Sorry, I was trying to pause it because I wanted to come back to this gentleman over here. Were you using to also explain the SQL code? Okay. Yeah, and so as we saw there, I think I just absolutely restarted the video. Was not my intent, but it was, this was a little bit longer video, so I want to kind of give us in chunks, but the ability to have it be an explainer of code that's already out there. I can't tell you how many times in my career that I had to take over code from somebody else, and it was just like, oh man, I mean, I wasn't proficient in the first place, and now I'm gonna have to figure this out. So be an explainer for me as that tutor. All right, let's see if we can get this.
We're integrating Copilot everywhere in Fabric. Integrating Copilot everywhere in Fabric to help everyone both upskill and become more productive with data. I'm excited to share a few new Copilot experiences in Fabric that are coming to public preview. First, we're adding a Copilot for data warehousing. Here I am in a data warehouse, and I can open up the Copilot task pane right away. I could ask questions here, but we're also integrating Copilot contextually in the experience as well. For example, there are a few shared queries in the database that I didn't create, and I don't really understand what they do. Now I can just ask Copilot to explain the query, and it adds comments letting me know what's going on. In this case, the query is calculating average fare amounts for each day of the week. Copilot can also help me with SQL I'm trying to write. I've been trying to get a query working to calculate the top 10 cities in my data with the hottest weather, but I'm getting an error. Fortunately, I can ask Copilot to fix my query with just one click, which it does by adding a halving condition to part of the query. And now my query runs with no issue. Of course, I can also use Copilot to help me write queries from scratch. Let's ask for a new query to bucket trips by how big the tip was for each trip. And just like that, I have the SQL code for the query, and I can run it to see the results. I can also ask support questions relative to Fabric, such as understanding my security options for this database. And I get a rich natural language result to help me understand all of my options. And finally, I can work right in the query editor, and Copilot will help with suggesting code based on my comments. For example, here I'm looking for the busiest holiday based on total rides. With a click, I can accept the Copilot suggestion and run the query. And now I have the results. As you can see, Copilot in Data Warehouse is a great way to both help upskill individuals as well as being a huge boost in productivity. Next, I want to show you how Copilot is coming into Power BI Desktop. Within Desktop, Copilot is being built in to help with tasks across modeling, report authoring, and finding insights. Let's start by taking a look at how Copilot can help me work with the DAX language in my semantic model. To start, let's switch over to the new DAX query view. Now, DAX can be a complicated language, and in this case, I've opened up a model that I didn't create. So there's lots of DAX measures here I don't necessarily understand. For example, there is this adjusted net sales measure that I might want to get up to speed on. This is a great task for Copilot. If I look at the measure and where it's referenced in the model, I can just ask Copilot, what do these measures do? And Copilot will look at the measures in the model and then provide a rich natural language description of the DAX. I can expand this and scroll down and see a good summary that explains what each measure is doing. And I can also ask Copilot for help getting started with DAX in general, such as asking what is the difference between sum and SUMX. But I can also use Copilot to just simply take some of the drudgery out of writing DAX. I could ask to see all of the analysis DAX measures by product. This isn't a hard DAX to write, but it would take some time. Instead, with Copilot, I have the code in seconds. And of course, I can use Copilot to write my own DAX measures as well. I always struggle to create ranking functions in DAX. So let's ask Copilot to define a new measure to rank products by the lowest return rate. And just like that, Copilot has defined the measure.
All right, I'm going to cut that one a little bit short. It's a little bit longer-winded one. So, but because I didn't see a lot of hands in some of these different coding areas, I feel like we've gotten the point, right? So the fact that Copilot is all about helping you in whatever the stage of data analytics that you're in to augment whatever it is the problem you're trying to solve. That's the biggest thing. I do like the word that Microsoft did develop, Copilot. It's very apropos, which is you're the driver, you're in charge, but we're asking for assistance. And so whatever the army of Copilots that Microsoft has to offer, including what we talked about here in Fabric, it is the ability to assist you in that fit for purpose task. I'm going to just kind of end on one last thing, and then we'll leave it for a few minutes for open questions or comments. But basically, what we've talked about today is kind of the maturity model of what we do with data. So, and number one is how to we got to get all of our data together. It has to be in a centralized area so that we can use AI over top of that. So that's always going to be key in making sure that we can create the right kind of experience. Number two is not only do we get the data together, but then we have to prepare that data, because data from all of these different sources probably don't have a similar format. You're going to have to bring them together in a way that they make sense and how they can be connected. But the last piece here is how do we extend it? What I showed today was basically everything out of the Microsoft Fabric. It is fit for purpose for this function. But you can build your own Copilots in Microsoft AI toolset. And that's the biggest thing. You probably have big ideas, whether it's in data or other areas of your job. There are ways to create your own Copilot that become fit for purpose for those tasks. And so that's the biggest key here, is making sure that as you have big ideas of how we do something differently, how to bring AI to help you do that. But you have to have it all centralized and curated before you get there. So just a couple of resources about getting started with not only Fabric, but just AI in general at Microsoft. I'll go ahead and pause there and just leave it open for the last few minutes for kind of Q&A. Any questions or comments as we close out? Yeah, so the question is, if we're in inning number 2 of a 9-inning ball game, what does inning 3 or on look like, right? So above my pay grade to some degree, but I'll address it to right now, the way most of us use generative AI, it's just interactive. We tell it what we want it to do, it gives us a response. Where it's already starting to get into the next inning is how we're integrating it into different workflows that we don't have to think about it. Or I don't know if you've heard the term agentic AI. So agentic AI is also talking about how it's actually understanding, identifying a problem, understanding the logic to solve a problem, and then carrying through with fixing the problem and having a complete feedback loop. Because right now it's all completely interactive. We wanted to do this thing, it shuts down. We go to the next task, we wanted to do that thing, and it shuts down. Agentic AI is about how it's going to be kind of self-solving for different problems that and those will be the additional innings or how we advance in the game. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, again, thank you for the time. If you want to have any other dialogue, certainly have some time up here before the room shifts to the next thing. Actually, we're coming to the close of the day, right? So, all right. Well, thanks for trusting me in closing the day for you. And if you have any questions or comments, more than happy to talk with you. Thank you.